We're trying, and the policy level is not to introduce new species, and that's been successful for the last 15 years, with the 12 years with the boat washing stations and things. But now you have a food web with the Mackinaw feeding in the center on the shrimp. You have a separate food web of the marine of the warm water fish and the plants. And then you have these endemic invertebrates, but much fewer than you used to have. So a total restructure of the biology of the system. So we're not perfect here at Tahoe. Given these realities, we have to still continue to manage the watershed and the lake. So I'm going to tell you about opportunities. This is one of my favorite parts, because this is the part that says, is this change all doom and gloom? Is it all depressing? You change a natural lake, at least for things that we love. What tools and knowledge do we have to guide our future? So we created something 3 years ago. The science has always been here to inform Julie's team, but the people part is very important, she said. So we created this thing called the Tahoe Science Advisory Council. You can see the website if it's helpful for you to take back to your colleagues in your countries. And it's a consortium of 8 scientists, institutions, Nevada, California, federal government, working together. We meet, at least I meet once a week, but as the director, but the group meets once a month to answer agency questions immediately. I have a problem with forest fires. What can I do quickly? And we have a council discussion, go back into the science literature and try to figure out what can be done immediately. One of these discussions that we've had is, where are we getting all these invasive species? Why did we get plants? Where did we get clams? So a quick study that was done, another opportunity, is we did surveys of human boating and recreation, and we find boats are coming from all over the region. And in many of these areas, other lakes and rivers, there are invasive species. So it's the boats that are the major vector for us. So what we were able to do is every August, we have an interaction of policymakers that comes together with the scientists and Julie's team. And we have these discussions on the state of Lake Tahoe and the science that we need. And so these are some of our senators, and you met President Sandoval yesterday. This is when he was governor of the state. And then we have discussions, and they announce things. So we use science to say, hey, look, all of those invasive species are coming from boats, many of them. Not from birds, not from like fishing equipment. The probability is very low that way. And so we had the 2 governors sign a pact to do a protection station. So every boat that comes to Tahoe has to be inspected and washed. And for us, that's important because we haven't, in 12 years now, we haven't had an introduction of any new species. It works. And of course, the public complained, especially in Nevada. There's this attitude in the Nevada culture versus California of, oh, get off my back. Oh, the government shouldn't tell me what to do. It's very cultural. I have some of that attitude. But in the end, these simple policies tend to work. And the people who we fought it originally, some of my friends who actually fought it, were actually on board with it now. Like, we haven't had a single introduction that affects the lake because we have very simple decontamination process and an inspection of all the boats. So we do about 5,300 to 9,000 boats a year. We have a control program also through the Science Council advice on how to control plants. Remember all the plants I told you about? This has been a big, big discussion for plant control. We're going to start using herbicides, which is a big deal for us, chemicals, in the lake because the plant infestation has gotten out of control. We're also developing new tools and technologies to try to control plants without chemicals. So this is a boat that we've created and designed. It actually doesn't use a lot of energy, surprisingly. We run it off propane, and we zap plants with ultraviolet light. So we just have the boat make acres and acres of movement to try to control the plants and to suppress them. Let's see if I can find that video. So this is ultraviolet light, where we put some testing, here's one of the areas we're going to in the Tahoe Keys, underwater. We'll go there in an hour. there's lots and lots of plants in this area. That's where the major infestation is for the lake. Not clear at all during certain times of the year. It's more like a wetland. So this is the underwater with lots of invasive plants. This is what happens when we start putting ultraviolet light down. You see a big change in plant community within 30 days.
Well, there are native plants and there are also invasive plants.
There are both.
So does the ultraviolet does not?
It kills the natives also. Yeah. And what we're trying to do programmatically, because we know there's natives everywhere, we're trying to at least get the non-native infestation. Now this is 1 month after.
Wow.
This is the site that has no tests of the ultraviolet light, so controlled.
Okay.
So still plants. And now much murkier because now you have more sediment flux. It'll take a year for this to figure out, but at least we don't see any plants. And so these are kind of the latest tests where science is trying to bring in new technologies to try to advise. Yeah, so 1 month after testing, no plants, but look how much sediment there is. Now the whole sediment is sort of turning over. So we need those native plants to come back to stabilize the sediment, which will take a year.
Wow.
But overall, nothing in the sediment. So we're feeling pretty lucky. This is what we do here, I should just say. These types of technology projects are partnerships with private industry. So a big private industry partner for us is a company in California. So we always try to do both marriages here now.
Using the ultraviolet, isn't that a risk? Because the cause of the invasion of the plants and that they are growing, the invasive plants, is the slight increase of the temperature of the water. This for the invasive plant, and for the native plant, the water is a little bit warmer, so their growth is not that good.
Yeah, we actually don't find that. We ended up doing temperature tests. The native plants do fine.
Okay, great.
They're getting crowded by the non-native plants.
Okay.
That's what's happening. The water temperatures here, as you probably saw yesterday, it's still freaking cold. So when we say warmer, it's not that much warmer.
No, but 1 or even 0.5 degrees can change.
It can.
It can make a huge difference.
The type of natives we have are not as sensitive to temperature change as the invertebrates would be, as the fish and invertebrates would be. The plants have a wider range. Yeah.
I'm looking at the size of the segmentation in the last video. After using the ultraviolet, it's making the down area more
flocculent, more sediment. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we'll see it today. We're going to go to the Tahoe Keys, and you can imagine the sediment being very fine particled. And so what's key there is the Science Council basically looked at the particles and then looked at the flow of water between the keys, which is isolated in the main lake. And we don't believe we're going to see a big flux of nutrients in the summer. What happens during runoff is what's key here. So we need the native plants to come in and stabilize. And this is all an experiment, right? I'll tell you next year once we get more data. This is actually new. This is as of maybe 3 weeks ago.
Okay, 3 weeks ago, but I have something in mind. Have you noticed a difference in the number of the types of fish that...
Yeah, totally. Okay. Great question. So one of the reasons we attack the plants and not the fish with chemicals is the plants are the habitat. And we being royal we, the Science Council suggestions were, you don't want to put too many chemicals in the water. Plant herbicides plus pesticides for fish. The public doesn't want it. We don't want it. So
and the invertebrates also doesn't work.
So let's hit the habitat first. And so herbicides tend to affect plants, not the invertebrates, but there will be some damage to the invertebrates. The habitat's changing. The plants are changing, right?
Yeah.
And then the fish virtually disappear. Now, are they moving to other plant beds? Probably. So these are only our initial tests. What we're going to do this year, it's a kind of a big deal. It got adopted 3 weeks ago for us. Very controversial, but we'll go to the Keys today. We're going to try to do a huge testing area now. So not the size of the building, but now 20 times the size of the building in different areas to see what happens to the fish populations.
are you considering to use genetically modified plants, native plants, to resist the chemicals that they are using?
No, and the reason for that, including the use of biocides to kill the clams, I can't remember, did I talk to you about that?
About the chemicals.
Yeah, but the reason we don't do that yet
Yeah.
is it also is very touchy with the public on genetic modification. And so this includes some of the discussions on the watershed.
Yeah.
The watershed is clearly changing quickly. The trees are dying, the forests are changing. We have had discussions at the Science Council of planting trees that will survive 100 years from now. Americans are really slow to respond overall. I mean, the temperatures are going to rise 3 to 5 degrees here in Tahoe.
I was thinking,
in my lifetime at the
I
end.
was thinking about the herbicide called glyphosate.
Yeah. Well, we're not thinking about that level. We're thinking about genetic modifications in the watershed first. Getting that through the public is going to take another lifetime for mine. Because we just have a resistance to anything that's gene modified, even though our agriculture is all gene modified, in my opinion. And I don't want to see those changes, but the forests here are changing so quickly. I don't think it'll happen in the lake. That's too close to people's drinking water and hearts. But I think the watershed, the amount of discussion we've had in 3 years on replanting the forest after fire with plants pine trees that'll survive with 5 degrees warming, it's getting more steam because otherwise you're growing the same old trees that are brittle, that die with every drought. Yeah, these are good questions. I don't have answers to them, but I think that's our future. 5 degrees, I mean, guys, Mars are conservative animals.
It's also, I guess, the use of genetically modified organisms, it's always risky because you don't know what is going to happen. Yes, maybe we have put in them certain characteristics that will make them survive the 3 or 5 or even with the way what we are doing now, 10 degrees increase. But you don't know how they are part of the food chain and they are part of the ecosystem. So it's always a risk.
Yeah.
Like the introduction of the...
I have to say, you guys are saying kind of the same debates we're going to have in our lifetime, and our children will definitely have. I'm with you. Okay, so my end of this is always, will the introductions continue? Because we ended up saving introductions from the boats coming in. Everything is washed and inspected. It's done by policy. There's an old story of the Tahoe Tessie, the lake monster. Do you guys have lake monsters in your area, or river monsters? Yeah, some old lore. Each lake sometimes has them. So this is the Tahoe Tessie book if you want to buy it for your children. Maybe there's a Tahoe Tessie out there. Maybe there's an introduction. And sure enough, in 2014, even with all the boat washing, we had someone put an aquarium dump of a shark skate in the water. So we saw this in where you were at Incline Village. Somebody reported it. It's not the type of species that will survive in the lake because it's salt water, brackish water. It needs to mate in salt water. But these are the types of foolish things that we still encounter. Is people who think they know what to do. And this is sad to me. Like a 3/4 meter long shark is in the water, right? Escape. Kind of crazy. So that's my lecture for now. Hopefully it gave you more details. So I have 4 questions for you. What makes Tahoe's clarity beautiful before all the humans were here?
The small watershed.
Small watershed 2.
The size of the
lake. It's always a ratio in limnology. Okay, good. And the low granitic geology, low nutrients. So it always has less nutrient coming from the watershed for the big volume. What is the ratio of nitrogen to phosphorus you need to grow algae?
16 to 1.
Elemental
16 to 1.
ratio for the chemists in here, right? Yeah. Molar ratio. And what is that ratio called? I only mentioned it once.
Redfield ratio.
So that's just another term.
Redfield ratio.
What are species in Lake Tahoe? The algae growth in the center of the lake affects the bottom of the lake. And why is that?
Clarity of the water.
The algae in the open water of the lake affects the deep bottom of the lake. And why?
It
Sunlight.
affects the clarity, so it doesn't allow sunlight to
Less sunlight.
Less sunlight affects the structure of the plants growing on the bottom, and what is that doing to my beautiful stonefly and two blind amphipods and fish?
Their numbers are decreasing.
Yeah, substantially, and the plants are declining. Okay, good, you remember those lessons. And my stonefly, that mother that releases all her eggs.
Endemic.
Are only found in Tahoe, that's called?
Endemic.
Okay, good. And then I'll end with this. What is the importance of science in making new policies? How can you do it? How can you use science to make new public policies to protect a lake with boating and introduce species? What do you do?
Research.
You do research, you have to sign agreements, you have to get the science into people's hands that can sign agreements. That's what Julie was saying, the people matter. Okay, so agreement signing, what else? Anything else?
Two states join in one path to protection, to protect.
Yeah, so we actually have a mechanism here. We brought in our Guatemalan vice president here. We brought our Mongolian ambassador here to observe every August a joint meeting between our federal and state governments to announce new programs. And having discourse or conversation in one place at one time with the science has become very helpful for us, because it's a focal point every year for people to work on Tahoe-related issues. So that's a good lesson that I always like telling people from other countries is, go talk to your politician, scratch their back a little, but try to make sure they know what you need and give them an opportunity to showcase the work. We don't have to win all the prizes, but they can win it once a year. So I think that politic is really important, even as teachers, right? Okay, any other conversations before we adjourn for the bathroom, coffee, not in that order, and gifts?
So, I live here, right? I didn't know any of this, except for Tahoe Tessie, right? because I'm local, right? I have kids, and you think what else is important to this is people that live around here that use the lake, right? We come and we ski and we go and we do all these things. So on vacation every year, we come here, and not the shrimp, sorry, what are they called?
Crayfish.
Crayfish. Where I go, people with their families take hot dogs.
Yeah.
Right, hot dogs, and we tie them to string, and the kids love because they'll crawl, right, and they grab onto the hot dogs, right, and we pull them up, and we put them in a bucket, right, and the kids love it, and they count, right, whatever. Some people eat them.
Yeah.
I think they're disgusting, but I'm not from the South, like you said. So should we do that, Sudeep, or should we never do it again? And all the families that are around us that do it, what should I tell them?
So, in my opinion,
And this is on the North Shore.
yeah, in my opinion, what the children are doing and connecting it to using hot dogs to get the crayfish and eat them, it's a minor part of whatever we're doing. It's not a do or don't, it's their connection to their place. So the reason I was trying to look up a photo is we have a photo of Senator, I don't have it handy, I don't think, of Senator Ensign, one of our senators in Nevada, who is here in this photo. Looking tired, but we had him hold crayfish, and then we had our other senator from
Which I also don't
California.
like to do, because I think they're gonna bite me, but okay.
Well, we had our other senator from California, senior senator. I can reserve some opinions about her, but whole crayfish, and they both thought the crayfish were native. And I guess what I would do is not say whether it's good or bad for feeding hot dogs to crayfish, because there's just millions of them.
Yeah, they're a lot.
But what I would do is use it as a moment to say, hey, these things aren't from here and they affect the lake. So let's not put it anywhere else. And when these two held them, and we ended up saying, hey, because they were like, we grew up with these here. We
Right.
always thought they were native. And I'm like, no, in fact, they're non-native. And they're introduced at Crater Lake to a lake in the north that's a national park. And Crater Lake had its final algal bloom last year. The crayfish are just eating all the snails and causing algae to bloom. It's a national park, it's a big deal. So we share that story and we say, you're not going to do anything about these crayfish now, but maybe we won't put any more things in. So I would suggest to you, maybe don't think of it as positive or negative. Feed them all the hot dogs you want, but use the moment to tell them about the 10-year life cycle. They eat all the invertebrates that eat algae, and that's part of the reason we're seeing the greening of the edge of the lake. So we don't want to put any more species in there.
It's interesting that you say it's over time, because the place where I go is very generational. Lots of families have gone, and it's like you see grandparents and parents and kids, you know, and they're like, this is a bonding moment.
Yeah,
that they've
total
done
bonding moment with
forever,
crayfish
you know.
especially, because they see it. So the crayfish in Crater Lake north of here, they were introduced in 1915, and they took 90 years before their population was all over the lake. So it takes literally 1.5 generations, 2 generations, before they have an impact. That's the lesson I'm always trying to impart. I actually think the crayfish are a gift to Tahoe because of the numbers of visitors we have here. It's an educational moment to say, these things were put in 1934 at the last dam, and now they're having impacts. Like, that means you as a child can have an impact, or as a teenager, maybe children may not get it, but can have an impact 2 generations out. Crazy. Okay, I'm gonna end with this. She wanted to talk about